It is 6:04 p.m., Monday, June 26th. I'd like to call to order the special board meeting of the Board of Trustees. Catherine, can you take the roll, please?
Franco's filling in as village clerk.
Franco.
Yes.
Would you please take the roll?
Absolutely. Trustee Mahoney.
Here.
Trustee Kunze.
Present.
Trustee Britton.
Here.
Trustee Saviano.
Here.
Trustee Schreiber.
Here.
And Trustee Sauter.
Here.
Invite you to rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see, next item of business is public comment. Is there anyone that's signed up to make some public comment?
We do have one. Mr. George Bauer, please.
I'm the guy that left all this information. Yeah, I own property across from 408 Barrington Avenue where the demolition is done. And I noticed something on the demolition. As you read, oh wait a minute, let's start it out. What's that property zoned for?
Chris?
It's residential, single-family residential.
Single family? Yeah. Is somebody gonna maybe try to change the zoning?
There was someone that came before the board.
Oh,
That
yeah.
nothing has changed. There hasn't been any public hearings on any type of zoning change.
Oh, because usually there's a sign put out, right?
Right, nothing has been applied for yet.
Yeah. Okay.
To give you
So-
some background,
Pardon me?
somebody came and said that they wanted to put 24 units there,
No way.
and they were turned down by the board.
Yeah.
So that's where it
I
stands right
talked
now.
to people, residents around there, and I live at 421, or I own property at 421. And the people around there do not want multi-families. So is the property for sale?
Well, it is, how would we describe that, Erica?
It's not actively being marketed for sale at this point in time, but it may be in the future.
Yeah, because when Mr. Miller was mayor,
Mm-hmm.
I had asked him if he's trying to sell that property and then they demolition the building and stuff. I said I'd be interested in buying both lots. So I was just wondering. No price was set, or when?
No, it's not currently for sale.
Pardon me?
It's not currently on the market. It's not currently
Yeah.
up for sale.
I was kind of shocked the way that demolition was done over there. And my neighbor, one of the neighbors, he saw it too. And what they did is they knocked down some of the concrete and then they filled the hole in with broken concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Now, over time, there's probably springs, because I have a spring. And there's probably springs in that ground and rainwater, and they just filled it in with concrete and they put dirt on top. Well, eventually that dirt is gonna settle, right? And whoever builds on that's gonna have a problem. So the village has gotta make the property owner aware
Oh, yeah.
of that situation. Because all, you know,
Absolutely.
Well, that would be, is that a question for Joe when he's back?
Yeah, unfortunately, our engineer is
yeah, I
not
know,
here
that's what I was
today.
talking with.
And so, the way that is done was as a solution for safety issues, so that there wasn't a void in the
Yeah,
ground.
there's
And to
gonna
make
be,
it
because they
more,
piled dirt on top of the concrete, and that dirt's gonna filter down, and the ground's gonna settle, or the structure's gonna
Yeah.
settle.
so I personally had a pool managed the same way after working with engineers and things like that done. And that was 10 years ago, and it's fine. If it's done properly, it's fine. However, any footings or any building that needs to go into it, it's all going to be taken into consideration. So this is a temporary fix to make it more attractive and for safety reasons, because
I feel that should be all dug up again and get rid of all that concrete.
The base of the reservoir itself is broken up.
Yeah, but all the,
Some of the concrete
I
was,
think there's a pipe over one end of that cistern, where you want to call it.
portion of that was removed.
Yeah, but that was for the water to go, right?
It was essentially an overflow, and anything going into and out of it, and from the reservoir.
Yeah, but it still gets water in there because you guys had to use a pump to pump it out. I was over there, I seen it.
you know, I think a lot of, in looking at some of your other questions, I think a lot of your questions can be best answered by the authority that we have here, which is Joe Hines. He's our village engineer. He was part of the plan on the demolition, and he is going to be the right person to talk to.
Yeah, I didn't see Joe there. I know Joe a little bit.
Mhm. And
I
what
was,
it-
I
I'm-
was,
but
I
I'm
grew
saying-
up in this town, so I
Yeah.
know, yeah.
Well, we understand your concern. Some of us had some of the same questions that you had
Yeah.
about it. So, I think it's really, if you've got more questions or you want to talk through it more, Joe would be the right person. We can get you his contact information.
Yeah, I gave my email address. to
Okay,
the gentleman
good.
there.
Good. Thank you for your concern, though.
Yeah. I'm just, whatever. Okay, I guess that's it. I'll talk to Joe.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks for
thank
your
you.
concerns.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that has a comment? Go ahead, Gary. How's it going?
Good.
Not good.
I'd like to know with this project of the water going on, just how long this is gonna go on. Since 4 of the last 7 days, no one's worked on it. Working days, not Saturday and Sunday. The signs were ridiculous. You'd think I would have got notified about this even happening. I find out turning off and almost causing an accident. The very first day, they put those signs right off of 72 there. Oh, and then detour to where? Put an arrow, you might as well go as far east as you can. Didn't tell you how to get around any longer from there. Everybody get lost and blocked off down to Carpentersville by the park down there by Main Street. That's where you think that's right to anybody? And now they're giving tickets. A couple people got tickets for going around these, because it's supposed to be for through traffic. How did they get to my place? But it doesn't worry. And I could maybe have got some answers when you go to people who I've left messages on your phone to call. I've been to the office, talked to the gentleman next to you and stuff. They were nice enough to talk to me for a minute, but they don't know anything. You would think when somebody affects a business that bad, that somebody should talk to you personally about this is going on. You have hit that business hard, being mine or anybody. And there's so many things I want to ask or say about that situation, but it's just too unnerving. My people didn't even know how to get here at first. They didn't even know. The only way they knew was going along the street. I didn't understand why there wasn't somebody like making it all one way would have been the answer on that. And they only worked on half of it. And I don't give a darn about a dump truck. They could have dumped it behind it, had somebody back there letting a couple cars go by that go by. But there was nothing. You put quite a hit on the business over there. And all I've ever heard is it's in the notes with the village or something. Nobody's ever called me. Nobody's ever sent nothing to us. I think it's really bad as a village to do what you did to a business. I was out there ready to put the nastiest things on those signs all the time because I think rightfully I deserve to do that because you really affected. But as soon as, you know, you affected the wedding place, right down past them, there was no reason it didn't come down to Michigan or the next street over, but, oh, heaven forbid, we have to maybe go down an area that, you know, people here live on those streets, and then your way to go by up to by the police station. No, well, nobody wants that, but you send them way out of line. It's just that you killed every kind of drive-by business there was for a business. And if I would have had anything, I would have made signs and doing it at this point and tell me it's only the end of June. And now it's like the end of July. And when I don't see people working 4 to 7 days, that's a problem. I didn't see it when I went downtown and these projects, they go overnight just about. But somebody's got to tell me an answer what's going on because it's out of line.
So Phil, let's talk big picture. Last I read on the Depot Life e-newsletter, it was scheduled to be completed the middle of July. Is that still the timeline that we're on, or does it look like we're going to be longer than that?
The reason why there hasn't been any active construction work the last several days is as part of the normal process. Once the water main is in the ground, end to end, we fill it with water, we pressure test it, and we chlorinate it and then sample it. So there's nothing we can do during the filling, pressurizing, and testing process. It's intended to be left alone in a quiet state. So
although it
5
looks like
days
there's
each
no
time.
work.
I mean, it was Friday and Monday, if that's the way it goes.
Thursday, we did a 6-hour pressure test, Thursday afternoon, evening. So we filled it with water on Thursday. And then Friday, we chlorinated it. So it has to stay chlorinated. And then we test. We test on Friday? And then
They chlorinated on Friday, and they pulled a sample. Today is Monday. They sample today, and they will sample again tomorrow. And those samples are a 24-hour turnaround. So we will find out today's results tomorrow, and then the results from that test will be given.
How far does it keep going down?
So at this point, the project schedule is testing will be, we should resume actual construction work on Thursday of this week. So we're looking at possibly in the next week. So we may be looking at restoration the second full week in July, which would put us on target for a mid-July completion-ish.
And we get next weekend, I mean, it's probably gonna be a Friday, Monday, Tuesday, all off, and not working again. So we're gonna make this
Tuesday,
July
I know
date.
they're off next week. I don't know about Monday. If there's things they can do on Monday, I'm sure they'll be happy to continue moving forward with the project.
Well, my biggest thing is that, like, not being notified and doing this kind of, putting it on your newsletter. I'm a caveman. I don't do anything on this
So-
new world or whatever. Maybe that's the way of the world, but you would think,
No, I get it.
I'm a pretty, you know, I think fair, good businessman where I'm at, and I bring a lot of, revenue into the town. But
Gary,
it just doesn't matter. It just didn't matter.
okay.
I mean, I should have been notified. That's what I'm all excited about.
I believe, was Gary's water shut off at all
No.
at the place? Okay, so it was in different residences where it was shut off.
Shut off effective
So, okay,
homes further to the south.
got it. So, Gary, I agree with you. The village needs to do a better job with communication. Eric and I just spent the last hour before the meeting talking about, in the past, we might have put out, for water shut off, or we might have put out in the email newsletter, but, that this is going to be happening, and there's detour signs that go up. But we need to do a better job of communicating either on sandwich board signs, using a new technology that we just are working on uploading based on utilities. and contact information from that, so that people that are affected by this can be forewarned, and they will have multiple ways of finding it out in case one way doesn't work. We need multiple redundancies built in for this communication going forward. On the upside, you're getting a brand new water main that's going to give you much better service than you might have had previously.
That's what I thought a problem was. I had a problem the other night in the middle of the night with no water, and I went that route first. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know, but the first thing that came into my mind was, they have this all tore up, nobody's fixing it, all of a sudden, is it a chance it happened? But it did.
So just because you're not seeing things happening above ground, that does, I mean, I think there's things that through the process that are still happening, that have to happen because of the process that we might not see. So it's fair, and I'm glad you asked those questions, because I'd want to know too. If we find that things are being extended, Phil, how are we going to be communicating, or is there a communication plan on if it's extending beyond the 15th? And if there's any more water shutoffs, what are other redundancies that we can put in for communication other than stickers up at the stores and that kind of thing?
Then we'll be implementing everything that we just talked about last hour.
Yeah, okay. So we're gonna.
Like I said, my concern is just that as a businessman, I should have known about this. And the first time I find out is when the street was closed. And then I went up and talked to the fellows, and they're going to be at it for how long? And I'm going like, I just thought it was just way out of line. I mean, it isn't a small thing. This is probably costing me, without exaggerating, 10 to 15,000 a week. I think that's a lot of money.
It is.
And you're already, what, 3 weeks into it and stuff now? So it becomes like, when you get in my pocket, that's how I get excited.
Sure.
I try to do, I made mistakes like anybody else, like our thing we did, but I come and say, I'm sorry. I just get mad at just, I try to get answers. I went to the village a couple of different times trying to check, besides, going down by the Public Works building, and, no one wants to say nothing. No one, I don't know. And, they don't send out things like that. I'm going like, well, that's horrible.
Gary, you should
saying
deserve the
that.
courtesy of someone coming and telling you. Someone should
You're not
come
saying,
and
it's
tell
just like anybody else that's been around town. But like one of the longer established businesses now in town, and we're losing the ones that have been there longer. And, it doesn't make you get a warm feeling like wanting to stay. And, everybody's trying to buy me out right now, but it's just like, I like where I'm at for a little while longer.
Sure.
But it's just like, things like this are just disturbing to me. Because I just think it's just, no one considered, there should have been a consideration when that was going on. One business was going to get affected a whole lot. And I think it doesn't need to be on a piece of paper or even mailed to me. I think somebody should have come knocking at my door saying, this is going on. And then I would have been able to address it in some way. Then I'm just all worked up about the world and stuff at everything now.
Okay.
I mean, I went way past my 5 minutes, and I apologize, everybody.
We'll do better.
But it's just,
We'll do better.
it's not good. Sorry.
Thanks for sharing.
Is there anybody else for public comment? No? If not, I guess we will close public comment and move on to the consent agenda. Is there any items in the consent agenda that anybody wants to have removed? And if we can identify those.
Could we move item E down to the other agenda items, just so I can get a better understanding of some of the changes?
Okay. Anybody else want to move anything out of the consent agenda? Another item? I would like to move out G and H.
G and H. So E, G, and H.
E, G, and H.
Okay.
And you don't have to read out each item, just
No?
the initials. If
Just
you're going to be the one making the motion.
Yeah.
right? Kelly? Caitlin?
Caitlin,
Sorry.
that's okay. If it's written and it's presented on the agenda, the
Yeah.
whole thing does not technically need to be read now.
Okay. So I will move to approve the consent agenda, items A, B, C, D, F. And that's all.
Second.
Trustee Mahoney,
Yes.
Trustee Coonsey,
Yes.
Trustee Britton,
Yes.
Trustee Saviano,
Yes.
Trustee Triber,
Yes.
Trustee Sauter.
Yes.
D, G, and H.
All right.
So then
So
do we
then,
start?
going back to item E, I'd like a motion for item E in the consent agenda.
I will move to approve an amendment to ordinance number 23-17 authorizing execution of a real estate sale agreement and purchase of real property at the northwest corner of Van Buren Street and Maiden Lane in East Dundee, Illinois.
Second.
Trustee Mahoney,
Yes.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
discussion.
We're going to discuss,
Second.
open
Sorry.
it up for discussion?
Yeah. So I know that this is just amending the PSA, but I wasn't clear on all of the things that were being amended. Anything that is a little nerve-wracking, I did see the environmental didn't need to be done anymore.
So we did, had a preliminary agreement with the seller
Okay.
for the contract, which then was approved by the board.
Mm-hmm.
And then the seller decided that they wanted to make a few more changes to the contract, and some of them were removing some of the environmental stuff. We're not super concerned about that because we've done all the testing in the immediate adjacent area. So it's unlikely that we would find something surprising because we already really know what we found. And then most of the changes were fairly
Mm-hmm.
insignificant. Just that one of the things they wanted us to cover more of the closing costs, which is kind of annoying, but we'll take it.
Okay.
I was wondering about this property and whether or not we wanted to, we're going to close on this probably before we close on the Hager building, it seems like.
It's likely, although I've been assured that we will close on Hager by the end of the year.
Awesome. I'm just wondering how we felt about opening that up for public parking, for the downtown,
Oh,
right when we get the prop, or even before.
I'm totally fine with that. That sounds like a great idea.
excellent. Love it. Any other questions, comments? Franklin?
Trustee Mahoney,
Yes.
Trustee Coonsey,
Yes.
Trustee Britton,
Yes.
Trustee Saviano,
Yes.
Trustee Triber,
Yes.
Trustee Sauter.
Yes.
That takes us down to item G in the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve a resolution authorizing an agreement with Pete's Towing.
Second.
Okay, so, just for transparency, I wanted to talk a little bit about, what the current arrangement is, since we're going into a contract and agreement, and how it would change.
So we issued an RFP for this service. Previously, the service was provided by two different providers, and there was a sort of handshake agreement to alternate every other month. Not particularly comfortable with handshake agreements, and so it was better for the village to be protected if we issued an RFP, got pricing that could be incorporated into a contract, and then had a contract. This RFP was out for 40 days, 30 days, somewhere in that.
About that range.
We did get one respondent. The respondent was deemed to be fully responsive, and the pricing that they've provided will be incorporated into the contract. So there's no surprises. We want to make sure that any resident who gets towed or out-of-town person has a price that has been stated in advance, and that alleviates many concerns that we had in the past. So we're comfortable with the provider who has responded, and going forward will be covered by the contract and the contract does have the ability for us to terminate it with 30 days notice, I believe. So we also have that sort of at our disposal should we have any issues that come up in the future.
And then the other vendor that is the other, every other month vendor declined to put in a proposal in.
Correct.
Okay. That's my question. Franco?
Trustee Mahoney?
Yes.
Trustee Coonsey?
Yes.
Trustee Bridgen?
Yes.
Trustee Saviano?
Yes.
Trustee Triber?
Yes.
Trustee Sauter?
Yes.
And then item H.
I'll make a motion to approve a resolution approving a contract agreement between the Village of East Dundee and Debt Book for lease debt and lease management software.
Second.
Okay. And this. I have no idea what this is. All this financial mumbo jumbo audit. What is this for? What do we get out of it?
Okay. So every year or so, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, they may come up with new standards for the village or municipalities in general to comply with as part of like our auditing process. So this year, they have implemented Statement 87. That's what their policies are called, statements. So they implemented Statement 87, and basically that is for us to kind of monetize or lay out all of the village's leases. So whether or not we get paid for leases on our property, such as our Verizon cell tower leases, our lease with Duke for the caboose.
Oh.
So anything like that, or anything that we may pay out for leases. I can't think of anything right now, but so they want to see long-term, how does that impact the village financially? What revenues are we to anticipate going forward? What expenditures are we expected to expend going forward? So that's one of the GASB statements that we have to comply with. The second one is for subscription services. So we have a subscription with Adobe Pro for our software, Microsoft, things like that. So
That's a lot of detail.
It's a lot, yes. I don't know why this has become a thing to now track, but I guess because subscription services are becoming much more popular now. So yes, those are two of the statements that we now have to comply with. We don't have the ability to comply with or use our software, our financial software, to help us manage those things. So we are seeking to work with DebtBook. They're a software company that was recommended to us by Lauterbach, our auditing firm, to help us manage those subscriptions and lease programs that we have.
Okay. So is this something, I imagine like with anything, like the first year, it's a lot of work because you
Yes.
just need to even gather it. Is this something that you see just doing this year, or do you see the need to continue it, and would it be this much for following years
Yes.
once it's set up?
So once it's set up, it'll pretty much be the same expenditure every year. I am assuming that our financial software would eventually catch on too. We do have a way to manage our capital assets in our financial system. So I assume that at some point that will be a service that they will provide. I just don't know when. But right now we'll be able to manage all of our ordinances and contracts through the DebtBook software. So we'll have one place to have everything going forward, which right now we're scrambling to try to find. So yeah, I think it'll be helpful, at least right now in the interim.
That's all the questions I had. Anybody else have questions on this?
I guess my question was, would we need to do this if we weren't buying these properties? But it sounds like we would, because
Oh, no, yeah.
it doesn't have
That
anything to do
doesn't
with
have
that. It's
anything.
just, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Very well.
Trustee Mahoney,
Yes.
Trustee Coonsey,
Yes.
Trustee Britton,
Yes.
Trustee Saviano,
Yes.
Trustee Schreiber,
Yes.
Trustee Sauter.
Yes.
All right, great. Moving on to the other agenda items.
I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance amending the number of video gaming licenses, i.e. Speedway.
Second.
They have none right now, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And we knew when they were going to open that they were going to want to put a room in.
So they did provide a mock-up of where they were gonna be with, I mean, that was years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we were just waiting for them to finish punch list items before we were bringing this forward for approval,
Gotcha.
which have now all been satisfactorily completed.
Excellent. Okay.
Any other questions? Nope.
No.
Trustee Mahoney,
Yes.
Trustee Coonsey,
Yes.
Trustee Britton,
Yes.
Trustee Saviano,
Yes.
Trustee Schreiber,
Yes.
Trustee Sauter.
Yes.
Next item, item B.
I will make a motion to approve an ordinance granting a special use permit allowing biochar operations as described in section 157.065A1L3, located at 569 Rock Road Drive, East Dundee, Illinois, 60118, Pen 03-25-200-015 in the M2 Limited Manufacturing District.
Second.
All right. Do we have a presentation on this, or is the applicant here?
The applicant is
The
here.
applicant is here. So this did go to P and Z last month, and I know you had some questions that I was not able to answer, so applicants, if you could please come forward, we could ask you a couple questions.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you? So biochar is the next big thing, huh? Or it's
We're
been
hoping.
for you.
Yes.
For you.
Yeah.
So it's been around a while.
The Aztecs used it in the rainforest
Yes.
thousands of years ago, but technology has advanced since then.
Okay.
So what we're looking to do is find a new beneficial use for the biomass that we create through our operations. Running the wood chips through a kiln creates biochar, locking carbon up for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and then also creates a product that is usable in agricultural and many other uses.
Okay.
What's an example of one of the ag uses?
It can get mixed with like chicken manure
Okay.
and then spread on fields for fertilizer. By mixing the two, it reduces the methane emissions of the chicken manure. I don't have the percent off the top of my head.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
So is the idea that you'll be selling this to your customers or wholesaling it, or what's the thought?
A little bit to our customers, but mainly through wholesale to people like Scott's or the Andersons is the plan. We don't want to be bagging or anything. We want to be sending trucks of this out.
Gotcha.
Okay. Alrighty.
Are there any odors that are produced by the process?
So from what we know from the air emissions testing done on other products or other kilns that are like these, it's virtually zero emissions. They're all burned up in the process. There should not be any odor or visible emissions coming from the machine as long as it is operating.
Does this, if we approve this as the motion was read, does it include these 6 additional planning and zoning recommended?
It does.
Okay.
Okay. And you're good with those recommendations?
Yeah, those are the recommendations that were discussed at the meeting. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great.
You agree to it? Okay.
Yes.
And from some brief reading, some of the contaminants kind of come out in the wastewater. Is there like mitigation in tanks to make sure not a lot of contaminants go into the wastewater, or is that something that our
There should be no contaminants or water effluent coming off this machine.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
Nope.
We're good?
Good.
Okay.
Good. Trustee Mahoney?
Yes.
Trustee Coonsey?
Yes.
Trustee Burton?
Yes.
Trustee Saviano?
Yes.
Trustee Triber?
Yes.
And Trustee Sauter?
Yes.
Okay, that takes us to item C.
I'll make a motion to approve a resolution approving an agreement between the Village of East Dundee, Illinois, and Axon Enterprises for body-worn cameras, vehicle cameras, and associated software.
Second. Chief, was this in the budget this year?
Yes.
Thank you. I can't remember all the things we go through in a budget workshop. I'm sorry.
It's been a while in coming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this has been talked about for as long as since I started, and we did talk last year about budgeting it for this year. Obviously, the deadline is looming, but we don't want to wait until the last minute. So,
Yep.
this assures us plenty of time to test and evaluate and implement and be on target. So we're super excited.
Awesome.
And there's no concern that, because I know we have some cameras that are obsolete at this point, there's no concern that what we are going in for right now will become obsolete before the law goes into effect?
No, the great part is that that Axon has it's called the Technical Assurance Program, that it comes with 3 refreshes and brand new equipment at the end of the 5 years.
Fantastic.
So we'll stay up to date.
Thank you. I didn't want to have obsolete equipment forever. So.
Chief, is there much training time that needs to go into something like this?
It's probably, I would say just a couple weeks of just
Okay.
familiarity. It's going to take a little bit of change,
Right.
obviously culture change and
Right.
getting used to it and so forth. But I think it's a long time in coming, and I also think the generation of police officers today, kind of the whole online cameras, it's not as much of a challenge as it might have been a decade ago.
Mhm.
So I think there's an expectation, and then we've had, one lateral from the city of Chicago, so
Mm-hmm.
he's had a camera for 5 years or
Sure.
longer,
Mhm.
so I found in my last assignment, when I had those folks, there was more acceptance too, because they could talk about their experiences and going through it at a very early stage. But now the technology has improved so much more too, that it really makes it much easier for the officer to implement.
Mm-hmm. And I also recall, do our officers currently just have audio recordings that they do?
So that
And
is
that
the-
obsolete?
So
now?
that's the legacy vehicle cameras that
Okay.
we're kind of shoestringing together at the moment, trying to hold
Got
on
it.
till these get here. And that's what that microphone does. It ties into the vehicle recorder. That will go away because the vehicle recorders and the body cams will all be integrated in one system. So one will turn on the other, and so they can seamlessly put the video and the audio footage together, trigger each other, and also the big issue with FOIA and redaction
Mhm.
is much easier for the staff to be able to get in there to handle the FOIA requests and all the court requests too. And also the Kane County State's Attorney has bought this system too, so that way our transfer of video to
Wow,
them for all the
seamless.
court cases is seamless, and no more discs to buy and having to
Or
hand carry
reformatting
DVDs
files.
and right.
Okay.
Cool. Anyone else?
Trustee Mahoney?
Yes.
Trustee Coonsey?
Yes.
Trustee Burton?
Yes.
Trustee Saviano?
Yes.
Trustee Triber?
Yes.
Trustee Sauter?
Yes.
All right, takes us to item D.
It's the discussion for
Yeah.
the lead service
Comfortable.
line. Everybody's favorite topic of conversation.
Showtime. It's showtime.
Good evening. In front of you is a lengthy memo summarizing a topic that's fairly complex, complicated, regarding the replacement of lead service lines, the legislation specific to this type of matter, and also talks a little bit about funding opportunities or options going forward for replacing lead services here in East Dundee. There's a lot here in this memo. With us this evening is Caitlin Wright. She's with Baxter Woodman and has a PowerPoint presentation that she'll take us through here in just a moment. Talk a little bit about the history and kind of where things are, and then we'd like to have a discussion about what we think we might want to do going forward. And then we'll bring something more formal back to you at a later date, later this summer, perhaps even into the fall, to look at what we might want to do as a policy going forward. One of the things that Caitlin will talk about here in just a moment is, in one of her slides, is she'll talk about the lead service lines and what's considered private, what's considered public, and how we want to address one or both sides going forward, and also a timing on how soon do we want to replace these lead services here in town. She'll talk about also the timing of the legislation going forward. We just recently completed or achieved one deadline. The next deadline we have, legislatively speaking, is a year from now, April of 2024, and so on and so forth. So, Caitlin, you want to talk us through your presentation? And I'll get you.
Can I get a copy of the presentation? It's where you can put it in this. Okay, thank you.
All
I can
right.
get it from the website.
Good evening. Thank you, Bill. So I'm Caitlin Wright with Baxter & Woodman. I've worked with the village and Phil and Greg on a handful of different projects, but specifically I've worked on water and sewer main design for the past 9 years, and now I am doing a whole bunch on lead service line, which I heard someone say our favorite topic. You're not the only community that has that feeling. I'm not going to say it's my favorite topic, but I know a lot about it at this point in time. So what I want to introduce to you this evening is what the law is overarchingly, and get into some of those details as Phil discussed about where does the village want to go, because the law is happening. You're going to need to be reacting to that law. Public Works, the water department is already having to respond to that law in various capacities, and so getting on the same page, creating some uniform decisions is going to help make that streamlined for the next 15 to 30 years. So as Phil alluded to, and I apologize, some of the graphics probably won't come through as clear up here, but I can always provide a copy of the PowerPoint. Different communities have different types of ownership when we talk about water service lines. And are we gonna try changing the resolution? Is that no? Oh, dim the lights. Perfect. I apologize. It's not gonna feel like a movie, but I will try and make it exciting. So, when we talk about a water service line, we are talking about the pipe underneath the ground that connects from that water main and gets that water into the house. Different communities have different ownerships. When it comes to East Dundee, your ordinance is written where it is split based off of what we call the curb stop or the B box. That is an exterior shut-off valve that the water department can use to turn water on and off. So from the water main to the curb stop, which you can kind of see designated by the dashed line right behind that sidewalk there, that is considered publicly maintained and owned. If something happened on that, the village would be responding to that. During water main replacement projects, it's normal to replace that pipe and that shut-off valve. That is standard practice. When we start talking about the private side, we're talking from that curb stop or B box just past it into the house where the water meter is. The reason I want to bring this up is typically when we do any sort of discussion about projects for municipalities, we are looking at public sector work within right-of-way work. This law, both federally and at the state level, is talking about an entire water service line. So we are talking about navigating both public property, right-of-way, and private property.
the law is going to mandate that that entire service line be replaced in the event that it is constructed of lead. So I'll get into that here a little bit more as we move forward. Any questions on that? No? Okay. I think it's always important to understand how we got to having the conversation about lead. I'm sure all of you are familiar with some headlines that have gone through over the past several years. They're normally pretty intimidating, and they don't normally shed a very positive light when we're reading them. But lead is naturally occurring. It's a mineral. It's not man-made, and it's not naturally found in source water. So if you go and test the Fox River, you're not going to find lead. If you go and test your groundwater, you're not going to find lead. That's not where we typically find lead. We find it in the soil. We find it in construction materials. We did, and when I say we, the industry, widely used it in the water distribution systems in the late 19th century and early 20th century. That was for pipes. That was for solder. Starting around the 1920s is when the health industry began to recognize that exposure to lead was bad, but we were really focused on like paints and like coming into contact. We weren't really thinking about it getting into the water at that point in time. If you fast forward to 1986, that is when Congress amended the Safe Drinking Water Act that prohibited the use of lead pipe, flux, solder. The reason I bring this up is part of the work that the water department is going to do and is currently doing is developing an inventory of where those lead pipes may be. We use this date and dates around this to safely assume homes that were built after 1986. I like to use 1988 because there's a little bit of a grace period in there. We can say that lead isn't in those homes. So if you're in a house that was built in 2010, you don't have a lead service line. In 1991, the lead and copper rule was first published. This is really when the water industry was starting to have conversations about lead. We are testing for lead in our water. We are testing for copper. So the industry as a whole has been responding to lead for a long period of time. The regulations now are far stricter than what we've been used to since 1991. And in 2014, 2015, there was the Flint water crisis. This is not the only community that has had issues with lead, but it is the first time that your residents and your customers really started to realize that there was a conversation happening around lead and water. And they weren't necessarily getting all the information. They were responding to those news articles. And so from that point forward, it's been heavily discussed in various capacities. So much so that we have responded at a state and federal level at this point in terms of new regulations. And again, not saying that Flint is the sole reason, but it was a major talking point. I do want to highlight here that the CDC has said at this point that there is no safe exposure to lead. And our youth are the most susceptible, children under the age of 6, pregnant women. So ingesting lead is dangerous to those individuals specifically. Now, East Dundee, you guys provide treated groundwater from 2 wells. You have well 5 and well 6. So again, emphasizing that you're not finding lead in your source water. That is not where lead is getting into a water system. You serve roughly 3,150 customers, and you have just shy of 1,500 water service lines. Because of those 2 things, you serve people, provide them water, and you have water service lines, you are needing to respond to the Illinois Lead Service Line Replacement and Notification Act. Even if you didn't have lead in town, there would be requirements underneath this law that you would need to be responding to. Now, at this point in time, the village has identified that there are approximately 243 lead service lines, but there's also still an outstanding 382 unknown. So by unknown, we don't know the material. It could be copper, it could be PVC, it could also be lead or galvanized, but that's the material that we're trying to identify in this inventory stage while we're collecting information. So I want to touch big picture on those laws. I'm not going to get into the federal law too much. 2 reasons. Illinois' law is stricter. Federal law is actually also changing. They're supposed to be updating it again this summer. We will see if that comes to fruition. But I'm just going to basically note that there is a federal law that other states are responding to at this point in time. So this is happening across the continental United States. Illinois law, it is impacting your water operations currently. It is impacting capital improvement planning. It is impacting your current and future construction projects. I know we are currently responding to the current water main project and some of the water service lines being constructed of lead, and what do we need to do in response to that. So this is not future anymore. This is currently something that the village is needing to respond to. There is a component where every community that serves water needs to develop a material inventory, basically identify every single water service line in town, what is it made of. They need to develop a lead service line replacement plan if they identify that they have lead in town. So that replacement plan looks into scheduling, how are you going to replace it, your methodology, how are you going to finance it. And then there are a lot of customer education and notification requirements underneath this law, rightfully so. And the big kicker here is the requirement for full lead service line replacement. So as I alluded to earlier when we started the conversation, we're no longer dealing with just public property or right-of-way. We also are navigating needing to replace something on private property as well. All of this went into effect January of 2022. So we are in the midst of this. There are a series of submission dates and compliance dates that I'll get into here momentarily. But we are currently full-blown in this at this point in time.
Can you pop back to that slide?
Yep.
I just want to clarify. So federal law, I see the note about compliance by October 16th, 2024.
Yes.
Concern, like, I just want to make sure that that is noted, because I assume that it doesn't look like those are quite as severe as what we have to figure out for Illinois by that same time.
Correct. So compliance date for everything that you need to be in compliance with at the federal law, Illinois' law is stricter on.
Okay.
So, and I'll get into that here in a moment. The only thing Illinois law does not touch on at this point in time that federal law does is sampling procedures and requirements. So your staff, your water staff will have to shift once Illinois adopts that, but at this point in time, whether or not Illinois adopts the sampling procedures is up in the air. I imagine they're going to. There's no reason why they wouldn't, but that wouldn't go into effect until basically after that compliance date.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. So I want to touch on the full water service line replacements. And again, that ownership piece. As of January 1st of last year, 2022, there's a couple things that your water department is having to respond to regardless of where we are in the course of this law. And that's essentially that if that water service line, if it's identified as lead, whether out in the field or in advance of doing any sort of construction work, if that's disturbed in any sort of way, that can be planned construction, that could be an emergency repair, that could be required replacements, that could be a private homeowner doing work, that could be public work. Anywhere along that line from main to meter, if it's disturbed, underneath the law, that entire service line now needs to get replaced. And there is a time limit on it, which is about 30 days. During winter season, they've given some grace and say 120 days. Few more specifics on that, but I'll keep it at that level. So for any current construction projects, this is something that the water department's having to respond to. Any sort of leaks on a water service line, they're having to respond to. The caveat here, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but I just want to kind of start having this conversation and thinking about it. Illinois law and federal law does not touch on who pays for what. So again, we're talking about public property, private property, who's going to pay for it. When we get to April 15th of 2027, no matter what, communities are going to have to start replacing lead service lines. So right now you're responding to, if you disturb it, you have to replace it. or it has to be replaced. The village is responsible for facilitating the replacement. I'll word it that way. When we get to 2027, you are responsible to start facilitating those replacements at a set rate until all of the lead service lines are gone. Based on the number of service lines that we're estimating, you're going to fall into a replacement rate of 7% per year, with the intent of replacing all of the service lines that are constructed of lead within 15 years. So that is about 28 lead service lines a year.
Can I just have one little side note on this? Our ongoing water project on Water Street, there are essentially 3 homes that are essentially affected by the project. However, because this is a new water main, the old water main, because there was one, didn't have existing lead services connected to it. We were connected to water mains on side streets. So we've given an extensive discussion. We've had conference calls today with our consultants at Action Women, including Caitlin, on how to address those. But because a project, a new water main that doesn't have existing lead services, it created a little bit of a complex, unknown gray area. But we're working through it, and so it's kind of loosely addressed by what we'll hear today, but we've had to consider it and kind of had to try to create our own interpretation of things and to address those lead services with our crew. So
yeah,
we are going to address. But.
So I don't want to get too far off track. So those 3 homeowners have been informed.
We've
of
been
the
in contact
situation?
with them and had regular communication about what our options, what their options are between both sides, if you will.
Okay.
Project will, don't get into too much specific, but we're going to install the service up to and including the V-Box. At that point, the resident will have the opportunity to tie on and connect to the new V-Box, which they, all 3 have elected not to. There's a unit price in the contract of $10,000 to go all the way inside the home. They have elected not to do that for whatever reason. So what we're going to do is make a short connection from the V-Box to the closest point of their service, issue them a filter that they can filter their water with, and then they'll sign the waiver, which we'll get into. It was referenced in my memo, and they'll have the option of, they can take their time, so to speak, connecting to our system at the V-Box at their pace, so to speak.
It actually leads them perfectly. I was going to talk about the waiver. So because we are dealing with private property, people can obviously say no for whatever reason, whether they don't want construction happening on their property, they don't have the financial means, what have you, they have the ability to say no. In the event that they say no, Illinois Department of Public Health has a waiver that they are expecting those property owners to sign. If they choose not to sign it, then we would be reporting it back to IDPH that they either refused to sign it or they were non-responsive. In either one of those situations, they have either signed the waiver saying we don't want to execute replacement on the private side, or they're non-responsive. The village is able to move forward with whatever construction project they're working on and complete their work in right-of-way. So it's not going to necessarily stop projects, but the state is wanting to see, when we're talking about that 7% every single year, those 28, that number is based off of full replacements. So they want to see that from main into the house, which is a little, we'll talk about what that means financially here in a moment.
So with the waiver.
Yes.
The waiver is available now. Mm-hmm. Will the waiver always be available, or come 2027 you have to do it, there's no waiver?
No, waiver will always be. At least I don't envision that ever being taken away, because again, it's private property. Mm-hmm. IDPH has announced that they are intending to update the waiver. They announced that the last fall regulatory update, so that was like August of last year. Mm-hmm. They also announced it at one of the biggest conferences that we have every year, which was down in Springfield this past spring. in that update, what they have said is they are intending to change the wording to make it clear that the intent of that waiver is not to have someone sign it because they can't financially afford. So if a homeowner is saying, well, I'm not doing this because of financial hardship, I would love to replace my lead service line, but I can't pay for it. The state doesn't want to see that being the reason it's being signed. They want to see that a community is working with that property owner to figure out a solution. Now, again, the law does not get into who pays for what, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead on that, but it does say that it wants to see efforts made, essentially, for some sort of solution, whether that's a low interest loan or a payback period or a cost sharing. Again, kind of jumping ahead on my slide, so I apologize.
And the waiver can be found online, it's readily available, accessible. We're in the process of creating a page on our website about that service line, everything, that services, and we'll at some point include a link to this waiver.
Okay, thank you.
I don't expect you to read the timeline, but what I want to get across is that there are a series of submission dates that the water department has already responded to and will be responding to for the village. First being the April 15th of this past year, the village needed to submit what they are considering a draft inventory of all the water service lines in town and what material we know about at this point in time. April 15th of next year, the state is wanting to see that completed, where you've gone through and you've identified to the best of your ability what each service line is made of. Also, April 15th of next year, a draft lead service line replacement plan is due to the state. Subsequently after that, in 25, 26, and 27, you're going to be resubmitting to the state that lead service line replacement plan. Again, when we get into 2027, that is when the state is expecting lead service line replacements to start being executed at that set rate every single year. So we're only a few years away from that actually going into effect.
And we found out today that we were in fact successful in applying for and receiving $40,000 in grant funds to complete the inventory. Service line material inventory due toward April of next year.
Yes. Yep.
So in order to understand that we have 328 or whatever that have been identified and or unknown, does that mean we've started the inventory already? And so the balance is just completing?
It's taking a very close first-hand look at the 300 and some that are unknown at this point to confirm one way or the other. Actually, Greg has brought a sample of lead service pipes, so we have to show and tell, so to speak.
I love how you have one, because I also have one in my backpack that just permanently travels around with me now. So
nice accessory.
Things I didn't think I was going to carry, but here we are. So I think the biggest conversation here is obviously it comes down to money. This is going to be an expensive undertaking for any community at this point. As Phil mentioned, the village has been allocated $40,000 through a lead service line inventory grant through the state. Those funds are specifically designated to assist the village in executing that inventory work. So figuring out where, what the material types of those unknowns are at this point, completing that inventory so that the village has a healthy understanding of what is going on in the system in town. So that's great news because it is an expensive endeavor. You would think that you're just looking at existing records, but a lot of times it involves going into people's homes and trying to get that additional information. In terms of just looking at replacements, right now construction costs from main to meter, we're seeing lead service lines replacements range from $12,000 to $16,000 a piece. I have seen it much higher. I have seen it as low as $8,000. and there doesn't really seem to be a rhyme or reason right now. This is new to the industry. Contractors are responding to this with a lot of unknowns. This is not a project where if you had 100, you're going to get an economy of scale versus 20, because every single house is different, every basement's different. Are you dealing with a slab? Are you dealing with a finished basement? Where does it come into the house? So I think these numbers will tighten up as contractors get better at it or more used to navigating it, but I don't know that we're going to see this reduced back to $8,000. I think this is a realistic range when we're talking about replacing. Yeah.
We had a resident last year who elected to replace their entire lead service line, main to meter, and it was approximately $8,000 for us and approximately $8,000 for them. So it's consistent with that 12 to 16 range.
Yeah.
And that resident was Keenway.
Okay. That's good information to have. Thank you, Bill. So again, starting in April 2027, that's if we're estimating that there's 400 lead service lines, that's taking that 297 or 87 number that is known and then splitting that 300 number in half. So if we estimate that there's 400 lead service lines, that sits at 28 full replacements per year, which is roughly $420,000 a year. So this is above and beyond what you're currently investing into your water system expense. When we talk about who's paying for it, again, as I said earlier, the state does not touch on who pays for what. There is no real conversation about that in the law. So if you're using your local funds, you would be financing your public side because that's what your ordinance is. That's no different than what you would do for any other water main construction project. But in terms of the private side replacement, you can designate how you want to. You could leave that up to the decision of that private homeowner and have them finance that piece. It is considered underneath ordinance part of their property. You could create some sort of cost sharing opportunity or payback period. You have that flexibility when using local funds. There is state funding available through IEPA's loan program, which does offer some level of principal forgiveness for lead service line replacements. This has been evolving and changing. Right now, it's about 50% for communities that are considered either small or disadvantaged. East Dundee falls into that category, but you would be competing for that principal forgiveness if you elected to go after that loan funding. In the event that you accepted state or federal funds, really state funds, you are then required to finance both the public and the private side. The state views it as, we are helping you guys finance this. We want to make sure that the residents are able to have their lead service line replaced.
Before you go on past that very important point. So if we were to borrow to replace both the public and the private, could we still then administer some kind of cost share for the private side where there would be income eligibility guidelines and some folks would have their entire portion replaced for no cost and some folks would have some cost share, but maybe not necessarily the entirety of it?
So if you are accepting that loan, no, how it reads right now. I'm not going to say that that's not going to change. IEPA at WaterCon said that that mandate was coming from US EPA and they were trying to fight them on it. So we have till 2027 to see where that happens, but if you went and got loan money next year, which would be the soonest the village would actually be able to execute that realistically, to start doing replacements now, because you can start doing them obviously sooner than 2027 if you had wanted to, then underneath the current legislation, no, you would be responsible to pay for the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There is language in the Act, the Lead Service Line Replacement and Notification Act, that allows communities to leverage property taxes to finance lead service line replacements. I will leave it at that because I am terrible at my own taxes. So I would just say if that is even something that you want to consider, that, you know, reach out to the village attorney. They might be able to help you navigate that. Sorry.
It's fine. We are happy to
great.
help you with all this. We are doing that with all of our clients.
Okay.
And if there was an interest in going with the flat fee to the water bill, so like every customer would put in some certain amount, we could use that for the public and the private side?
Yes. As far as we've seen, and there are communities considering this at this point in time, that is allowed. I haven't heard anyone fighting that. Now, you might have residents who feel that that is not comfortable or fair. What if I don't have a lead service line? What if, you know, I'm paying for someone who does? But in the same breath, if you're doing a water main replacement project on the east side of town, someone on the other side of town is going to still be paying for that in some way or form through their water bill. So it's different communities have different thought processes on it, but right now there's nothing in the legislation that would keep you from being able to do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I have a feeling there'll be more questions on this. I just want to touch on a few more things and then open this up for conversation because I know I've gone a little bit long. In terms of what the village is doing and needing to do moving forward, part of what Phil wanted to do is start having the conversation now, educate the board because this is a very big decision moving forward. There's a lot of implications of it, both financially and as well as just engaging with your residents and educating them. I mean, if you think about some of the newspaper headlines we've seen, lead is a scary topic for anyone who's not comfortable in the water industry and understands kind of the water chemistry and what's happening. So wanting to create some transparency and some education now so that we can move that conversation forward. Also, underneath that, by understanding the law, we build consensus and then therefore can make educated decisions. The material inventory, the village has already executed what I'm considering phase one, which is basically looking at your existing records and figure out what you know and what you don't know. And that was submitted underneath that draft inventory. We are now entering in what I'm considering phase two and phase three, using that $40,000 that has been allocated by the state. And that will, what we like to do is first educate the residents and help them self-report back. You're not going to get everyone to do that. I can promise you my grandmother is not going to self-report back what her water service line is. But using them as an opportunity to start the conversation, get them aware of what's happening in town, and then also try and collect that information passively. Phase three would be scheduling in-home inspections and seeing what's going on. There's also the ability to excavate down to see the material. That's expensive. It's not required underneath the law, so that would be, it's not actually something I would really even recommend for the village. You already know that you have lead. So if you have a few unknowns going into next year, at that point the state just considers unknowns lead until you prove otherwise. So it doesn't change your situation. Public education. This is actually something that's really important to me. I think that educating the public on this conversation or topic early, creating a uniform message, letting them know where to get information from is really important. And so we are going to be working with village staff to help develop that, make sure that the content is uniform, understandable, and then underneath state law, it needs to address the dangers of lead, options to mitigate exposures, and then just generally what the village is doing for next steps. So I know the village has, you've got your newsletter, you've got your website, you've got your Facebook page. We want to use that to help spread the information and make sure it's accessible to everyone.
Can we also do some of this, start some of this education on our water bills?
Yep.
That go to residents anyways, because hopefully they're looking at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the public education, even though it's further down on your list, that's something we need to start now.
Yeah, I think all three of these are kind of parallel in terms of
Okay.
process.
Yeah, it's not.
Again, I try not to lecture on public education because I have a tendency to get really passionate about it. But I do completely agree with you. It is something to start now. So, in terms of village next steps, we are helping with the inventory underneath that lead service line inventory grant. The village is also going to need to look at developing a lead service line replacement plan. And again, that first draft is due next year as well. And then obviously part of the conversation or hefty conversation today is financing. And that decision doesn't need to be made by any means today, but starting to think about where those funds are coming from. Are you going to consider cost sharing? I can tell you that a lot of the communities that we work with that are actively doing replacements right now, whether because it's a water main construction project or just they've started doing lead service line replacements, the ones that have the most buy-in are the ones that are financing the whole piece or offering some sort of cost share, which makes sense. I have a lead service line. I don't know what my community is doing, but I can tell you if you approached me and said, hey, like it's gonna be X amount of money, that's gonna be hard for a lot of residents to necessarily navigate. So you give them enough time to navigate that. It's not, hey, you need this in a month, please do that. Or, there's another conversation. So I want to open it up for questions or dialogue or whatever.
Brandis, how many addresses do we build for water in East Dundee? Business and residential?
It's, yeah, it'd be 1,487. Man, yours looks nicer than mine.
So this piece, the valve brass portion, in this case, is threaded directly into the water main or a clamp that's attached to the water main. That ball portion is how they connect the lead to the little whip that comes out the backside of it, and then the rest of it going into your home would be lead. This piece I have over here, essentially the same as that, but backwards. The curb stop, curb valve, sometimes referred to as V-box. That's this. So there's a tube that most of the time you can see in your yard, maybe 3-inch circle, black, rusty, sometimes painted blue, leads down to this. And our key would come down, you call and say, hey, I got a plumber doing some work, or an unfortunate event where we're shutting water off or not payment, whatever. The key goes down and turns this little valve, which is not turnable with my fingers, but that is that.
Do you have any,
There's no date on this one, but
yeah, do you have any estimate on how old this is?
I mean, I know both of these pieces have been out of the ground in the past 10 years, but as far as how long they were in the ground, I don't know.
I would say, 30s to 50s probably would be my guess. When we start getting into the 60s and 70s, lead wasn't being actively used as much. So, yeah.
What if our house was built in 1855?
Right, that's, is there something before then?
So, no water in your house, that's the problem.
Yeah, it probably, there's a high chance it's lead or galvanized. I'm not going to say it's not that, or is that for sure. I can absolutely walk you through how to find out after the meeting if you would like.
We did go through that actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Andy found it.
I think that,
magnetic or not.
Yeah.
Steel or lead.
Galvanized is magnetic, so if you take a heavy, if it's a grayish pipe, right, obviously, hopefully you can distinguish between PVC or copper coming through your wall. There you go. But if you can stick, you need like a good magnet, like an earth magnet or something. If it sticks to that pipe that's galvanized, it's the only pipe material that we use that is, or was used, that's magnetic. If it doesn't stick, it's likely lead. Another way to test for lead is if you took like a screwdriver or quarter and you went to scratch it and it flakes and gets shiny, lead's very soft, so you should be able to flake that pipe, and you'd be able to tell.
And it's-
Yeah. There you
Thanks.
go. Show and tell. Thank
Show
you,
and
Greg.
tell.
There
On
we
the
go.
website, we'll have little pictures and characteristics of the three, different kinds of pipes.
Mhm.
For the vast majority of us on the board who actually have lead pipes or have houses from, yes.
Yep, I bought my house before I got involved in this regulation or regulatory update, and now it's a bit ironic, so,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
I have kind of, it's a random question. I'm on a private well,
Okay.
so I'm not affected. My particular house is not affected by this,
Mhm.
or
Not in terms, I don't, I would still be curious to know what your material is, but in terms of being required to replace or fall underneath the legislation, no.
okay,
That would be your own personal decision at that point.
Okay.
most of it's been replaced already. But for other people that have
Mhm.
private wells.
So private wells don't fall under the legislation.
No, you have to be designated as a community water system, which you serve 25 or more people an average of 6 months out of the year, so.
It's a great question.
This is barely a drop in the bucket, but our current fiscal year budget does allocate 30,000 for lead service and replacements. Our public portion, should any homeowners decide to pursue their current fiscal year.
Okay.
And then going forward, we'll take a look at. what we
So,
want.
logistically, there's the financial part of it, but then there's the logistic and strategic part of it. Like when we are replacing water lines or we are replacing roads, like if something like this happens, you have to tear up the road, right? So you don't want to like resurface Bonnie Dundee like they just did,
And then come back.
find out ComEd needs to tear up your roads or
Great
whatever.
question. We had,
Yep.
no, stay there.
Not to throw more complexity into this, but it's
phenomenal topic, though.
That's the reason why first, a portion of Second, the southern half of Second has been improved in recent years. I don't know how long, is it, 10 years ago, or 5 years?
Not quite that long, but yeah.
But the northern
Not all of
portion,
it.
King William, Windholes, all of those streets essentially in the flats are, some of them are in bad need of improvement, but we've held off on doing anything for this reason here. Otherwise, if we did resurface and improve them, we would be cutting into a newly improved street to tie in the new services, non-lead services, and that would just defeat the purpose of improving those roads at the present time. So there is some, I'll call it sense of immediate need to do something sooner than later with this, some of those streets and in the Flats neighborhood in particular, which is probably the vast majority of the lead services currently are anyway, so.
That actually answers a huge question for a lot of people in my neighborhood. You know, why do we have so many potholes?
Yeah,
That is,
for sure.
that is a big flashing answer. Thank you.
So
And those roads
question-
unfortunately aren't, they need to be fully reconstructed, and that's curb,
Right.
base, everything,
Yeah,
curb to curb,
that makes
including all
complete
curb,
sense.
so.
For the IEPA loan forgiveness programs, do you have any sense of, like, looking at other communities, what a community our size maybe would be able to get? I think I saw Elgin last year got maybe $2 million, or do you have any guess as to what we could expect to try to get?
Yeah, and you can ask for the full amount, which would be, if we're using that $15,000 range, assuming 400 service lines at $6 million. So you can go to IEPA and say, we're asking for $6 million. In terms of the principal forgiveness, right now, how it's written is it's up to 50%, not to exceed 1.25 million, I believe, in a given year. So to maximize that, you would really only want to ask for 2.5 million every single year. And you can, through your project plan process, which you have to submit to IEPA to get that approved before you can actually get a loan. You can say, okay, we want $2.5 million for lead service line replacement for the next 2 years, 3 years. So you can ask for up to 5 years of loan money in your project plan. And so you're fine for your size, you just want to be strategic in how you're asking for that money to maximize that principal forgiveness. Now, I will say that every single year, IEPA comes out with new rules on what principal forgiveness is, so we're always kind of responding to last year's, the year behind rule, because you won't be able to get the money until that next year's rule comes out. Does that make sense? But I don't envision this changing drastically right now. There was a big change this past year, but I think it's gonna settle out for a little bit, at least for the next few years.
So that money, if you were awarded, say, 2 million, that is for, the loan goes to the resident or to the resident and the village?
So the 2 million goes to the village, but then the village is facilitating the lead service line replacement, and we would be having to facilitate and pay for both the public and private side if you accepted that loan.
Are any of those competitive, you said? Is there any competition with programs?
Oh, in terms of, yeah, there is a bit of competition in terms of, I mean, other communities are going after that loan money as well, and there's only so much funds available every single year, so there is a scoring system in terms of where you fall. I don't do the loans. We have an expert in-house that does do them. She's very good at giving you in advance an idea of, okay, I think you're gonna fall here
Where
based off of the rating system. Yeah.
I know the city of Elgin, for example, has 12,000 known lead and or suspected services, so
They're also probably getting rushed because they've had some exceedance levels in their water sampling. So they're going to be getting some additional state aid, I'm sure, to help expedite the situation.
Phil, when we redid Van Buren, 8-10 years ago, whatever it was, did we do anything with the water lines at that point?
there was a water main, but did we do the lead services?
We did. Yeah, those services were replaced up to and including the Buffalo Wise.
Hey.
Yay.
Nice job, guys.
Answers my
You
question.
two.
We're good.
So you two are half done.
Half done. And
That's okay.
that's actually a good point to bring up in terms of the eyes of the state. So it's half done, but the state is going to look at if any portion of that service line is constructed of lead, public or private, they view the whole thing as lead. So until the whole thing is no longer lead, it counts towards your inventory as a lead service line. So.
Great presentation, thank you very much.
Yep.
This is a lot to absorb, this is a very big topic, and it's a huge responsibility. So you need to think about what we are confronting over the next 7 to 15 years. It's a lot to get done, but our problem is what I would call manageable. If I were Elgin, I would be having a little freak out, but this is manageable. It's going to be expensive,
We don't
but
have Elgin's budget either, so.
right. But we need to start putting numbers down and sort of getting a sense of what the board thinks is the proper direction for us to go, because we do have several options. Many of them are pretty decent options, and as we go forward, starting this draft plan that we need to submit in early '24, we have the bulk of the summer and fall to start crafting a draft of what we want to potentially start with. And just because we start with one direction doesn't mean we can't pivot at some point, but we need to have that plan in place. And if you have thoughts on directions you'd like to see us pen to paper and calculate out in terms of loans, cost shares, income guidelines, all of those different things, we can start doing that. But this conversation will continue. We'll probably resume it in the fall, I was thinking.
Yeah, if I can add one thing, Caitlin and I had talked, and I asked Caitlin about the timing of pursuing some of these low interest loans, and she had suggested that we might want to consider finishing our inventory that's due April of next year. Get that fully completed and submitted, and then at that point, since we'll know at that point what we have in front of us, so we can pursue some of these low interest loans, not in '24, but ultimately in '25.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. There's a bit of a scheduling piece when going after IEPA loan funding. You have to have portions of what you submit to the state approved by March 31st of any given year that you are trying to obtain funding for. And there's an extensive review process, and then actually putting that deliverable together also takes some time. So IEPA normally suggests 6 months to review what you submit to them. So that would mean you'd have to submit by September. We normally say it's about 3 months to put the project plan together.
So yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. If you wanted to go after it for next year, it would be yesterday. It's not to say that you couldn't do it, but it just would be a very condensed, aggressive timeline.
Sure.
You can always try and go after what they call bypass funding for that following year, so that becomes available in January. So if you weren't approved March 31st with that plan, maybe you were approved in May of that year, there's the opportunity for potentially funds at the end of, say, 2024, but those aren't guaranteed. Those are funds that are left over. They weren't used by other communities that had been allocated those funds. So that was my recommendation to Phil, was to wait. You're already in this inventory process. You're kind of too condensed on a timeline to potentially get those funds for next year. This gives the village time to decide, do you want to, what path do you want to do, and then you can move forward.
I just have one other question, and it may be outside of this, but you know, when it comes to somebody selling a house that has the lead pipes in it, is there any kind of like additional disclosure that's going to be put onto that? And
not yet. I envision that there will be.
Yeah.
I almost guarantee that there will be. I mean, you have to disclose if you know or have lead paint.
But people lie on them too, I know.
I mean, I don't know that it was disclosed, and I can guarantee you I have lead paint in my house. It was built in 1927. So I can see it flaking all the time. So I can promise you that it's going to be at some point. Whether or not people do, I don't know.
Okay.
Part of the notifications, and I didn't get into these in detail, but as the village identifies homes that have lead, they are required annually to let that property know that you have a lead service line. So until that lead service line is replaced in its entirety, there is that notification piece, even if in a real estate transaction that homeowner wasn't notified. So.
Okay. So you said we can only collect so much from these loans per year. But say we only did a $1 million loan this year, next year. That means that for the entirety of this program, we cannot ask the residents to pay for any of it. Or does it mean just for that year?
It would just be technically for that year, but you are kind of setting a precedence.
Right.
Would be my thing. If you're paying for one street's entire service line, and then you ask, you know, the neighboring street to cough $8,000, or
Right.
it might
That would be bad.
cause some public relations.
I agree.
Yeah. So that's the other kind of conversation piece. Is I feel like if you're going after that loan funding, it does create a precedence. And even if you're not going to get that funding until 2025, like, what do you want to do until then? Do you that's where these bigger conversations come into play. And I think that's really why Phil and the group wanted to bring this forward, was you're going to be having water main replacement projects. You're going to be having water service lines that need to get worked on. So those service lines, if they're lead and get disturbed, we're actively having to respond and execute full replacements at this point in time. So what does the village want to do to start kind of creating that precedent? Yep.
And we have communicated to 2, 3, 4 residents that have approached us, Greg or myself, and we've said, if you want to pursue your lead service line replacement, we would, of course, take care of our portion, main to curb stop or Parkway down, and then their responsibility would be to the home.
So that's part of that 30 grand that you said we already have in the budget.
Yeah, so that would be
you've
our
already budgeted.
public portion of each lead service.
Got it.
And I suppose if we had more than 30,000, we could revisit that conversation. We present something to you all if you're okay with going public. Yeah, I don't have to read things.
And I'll just jump in. I work with a lot of different towns. I have not found any one community that's doing it the same as another right now, so.
There's no best practice?
No. I have a community where the entire service line is owned and maintained by the resident, and they are putting the entire financial ownership on them. We've got the complete opposite. Like, it's a wide range right now. So I think you just have to figure out what's best for the village overarchingly, and that's the decision. So, but I'm happy to give examples of what other communities are doing if that's ever wanted or necessary.
And in one section of my memo, I did list several half dozen or so options for funding that service center placements.
What's
And
the
then-
level of confidence, sorry, Andy.
No, go ahead.
What's the level of confidence we have that if we receive the loan 1 year, we will get it in following years? Meaning, you know, to your point, if we start with a $1 million loan
So
next year, and then we are then responsible for paying for it, but then suddenly we don't get it?
no, so if you
Okay.
submit your project plan, our recommendation would always be to ask for 5 years of funding.
Okay.
And then if they approve that project plan, you are intended to
understand
get
that.
that. Now,
locked
where
in.
you
Yeah.
fall may shift.
Right.
But the intent is that
Okay.
they're doing that.
I understand that a little bit better now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking we had to resubmit every year.
No, you do resubmit a loan application every year, so
Mhm.
that process does happen, but the project plan in itself, once it's submitted and approved, you're in good shape.
Okay.
And then you had mentioned that you can't do a partial, like the village can't do up into the B box and not do the rest anymore, or that just doesn't count towards us completing, like if we do First Street, you're saying there's no economy of scale to say, well, it's torn up, let's do all these houses at a discount, but we do kind of have to coordinate if we do redo First Street and we redo up to the B box, do they have to at that time work on the house?
Yeah, I think there's two components there of what you're asking. In terms of replacement, regardless of who's paying or economies of scale or anything, if a service line is disturbed, whether on the private side or public side, that entire thing needs to get replaced. Unless the homeowner, and that's effective today, that is going on right now. If the private homeowner says no,
Oh, then you sign the waiver.
sign the waiver, or they're non-responsive, right? I mean, they could also refuse to sign the waiver. You can't force someone to sign it. At that point, you could still execute your side. There's nothing really you can do at that point, but it would not be considered a full replacement at that point in time. In terms of the economies of scale, the reason I brought that up is more so just to understand when we're looking at the $12,000 to $16,000, like, don't go, okay, well, if we do 100 of these, we'll be closer to 12,000 versus if we are doing only 20 of them, we'll be sitting closer to the 16. If you're doing a construction project, you're digging up that street, I would just recommend to be planning on tackling all of them at that time, regardless. So.
Right, and if you tear it up and then ask the home and they say no just because we can't afford it, then you should find a way to do it anyway, and then we figure out the way to make it happen. We don't just say, okay, sign this.
So that's not written in law. It's just been verbally noted by IEPA and IDPH that their intent is that that waiver is not to be used if there's financial hardship. But again, that's not written anywhere. The law does say that they want, that there needs to be thought process essentially on, I should revisit the exact sentence, but thought process on how what funding options are available for executing replacements. But at this point in time, there is nothing, like, if the village says it's private property, we don't have the funds to do it, but we will happily facilitate the replacement, and the homeowner says, well, I don't have funds to do it, and they sign the waiver, that's still acceptable at this time, so.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, unfortunately, an uncomfortable gray zone for both. I mean, I get it from the municipality side, and as a private homeowner, I get it on my side too, so.
Yeah, and the three that we've asked so far have, I feel like probably 99% of the people say, I don't have 10 grand right now.
Yeah.
And so,
Right.
yeah, so we need to figure out before 81st Street, like some good alternative options.
Yep. Yeah, that's,
Yeah, because we definitely don't want to have to dig this up again.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I don't think any of these homeowners would want to think
Or
about the
business
fact that in
owners.
3 years, they're going to have to do it again.
Wow.
Okay, my head's going to explode now.
But is it safe to assume that it would be cheaper while it's torn up at the moment and they have the equipment out there to do a few of them or to not have to redig it up?
Restoration is certainly an expense to the project. Well, actually, for our public portion, that's for sure. It would save us money. And typically, it would just be restoring or perhaps a little bit of sidewalk. For our side, it would be typically curb, sidewalk, and the street.
so in terms of that current construction project, the homeowners have declined. The village can still move forward with their portion. That is acceptable underneath the law, and it's acceptable underneath the way the current IDPH waiver is written. The state has said at this point that they are planning on updating that waiver. They have not at this point, so.
So the reason, help me on the current project, the mains that those three people are connected to are other side street mains, not the current main that's being replaced, because there wasn't one there before.
For example,
So it's not been disturbed.
correct.
Their main hasn't been disturbed.
So the home at Second, you know where Second ties into Water Street? On the south side there, their service runs down the railroad. It ties in at that point. So when we're putting in the new main, we don't disturb, so to speak, we do not disturb.
Right.
Now I understand why you're just kind of putting in and tying off and.
Because we're trying to be careful not to set a precedent that
Right.
someone can say, hey, you did this for them, why don't you do this for me? And that's
Yeah.
why
Yep.
I'm trying to be consistent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't need to vote on that because it's just discussion.
Just a discussion.
Item E, motion, I'll read the motion.
I will move to approve a resolution approving an agreement between the Village of East Dundee, Illinois, and Clark Hill for labor and employment law services.
Second.
Is this the Jennifer Ramsey protection clause? Or is this something else?
I'll be silent on that.
Because you're smart.
So since December, we have been utilizing the services of Elrod Friedman for our village attorney. They're covering mostly land use and other general code stuff. But there's been a need for more specialized attention on labor relations and other employment law issues, work comp specifically as it relates to the police department.
Well, are they going, would this lawyer then represent us in negotiations for?
I'm sorry, can I
Can
interrupt?
we just stop a minute? Could you guys take your conversation outside?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would this lawyer represent us in negotiations with the union contracts?
Most likely, yes.
All right.
Any other questions? Okay.
Trustee Mahoney?
Yes.
Trustee Coonsey?
Yes.
Trustee Britton?
Yes.
Trustee Saviano?
Yes.
Trustee Triber?
Yes.
Trustee Sauter?
Yes.
Okay. Reports. Sarah, you want to start and then we'll go around the table this way?
Sure. I have very easy questions for once. I think we spoke briefly ahead of the meeting. Do we have a plan for a committee meeting, for the event committee meeting this week or next week?
So we're looking at this week or next week for events committee, and I just need to check with trustee Saviano. It's like trustee Tricia.
Trustee Tricia. She'll take it. Okay, that was one easy. The other is, when is the next board meeting with the holiday?
July 17th is our
July
next
17th.
board meeting.
Thank you. That's all.
I have a kind of a long list, but had a resident contact me about all of the trucks, increase in truck traffic, material trucks on Van Buren, and anticipating that's because of the detour instead of going down Water Street. However, there's a claim that there's a weight limit on Van Buren. I don't know if that's true or not, and that some of these trucks might be exceeding that. I also know that I had them going down Bonnie Dundee a lot, but I know I then tracked them down to the ComEd project that's going on there as well. So they're within the neighborhood. So,
Can I tie to that?
Yeah.
We've had them going down Water Street. We had a full-blown semi with a full-blown trailer with like a sleeper cab that went down the middle of the road and knocked trees on both sides. So there's a need to, with the road construction, I think, we're getting close to the end of the project, but there is a need to give more appropriate routes, especially with all the trucks. I feel a lot for all the people who have complained about the truck traffic on Water Street. I have real heartfelt appreciation for them at this point, because Michigan seems to be one of the new roads that they're taking.
yeah.
That would be
Which is already
That's
a
a
narrow
tiny
street.
road.
You can't, I can't get my truck down
Yeah.
down my street some
Frightening.
days.
Which,
So
which is in part why we initiated the road closure
so far away.
barricades at Illinois to keep the trucks off of our local roads.
Right. Oh, I understand. I have video of a truck having to actually try to make more than a 90-degree turn because they bypassed the road closed signs. And then last week's adventure was the giant one, actually putting it in reverse on Water Street in order to turn on to Michigan. So it's been fun. I'll be very happy when it's over.
So again, do we need to be putting the signs further out into the bigger roads, I guess is the biggest question, or was that already done?
We
But
modified-
people don't care.
A little
Doesn't
bit
apply to
everything.
me, doesn't apply to me.
We've adjusted the detour routes a little bit,
Uh-huh.
we had signage in Carpenterville, and moved it Illinois.
Yeah,
Coming off of 72, we made some adjustments. We've tried to accommodate
okay.
everybody, but yes, also maintain some type of warning that there is a road closure during construction hours.
Right.
So and it's
Is,
northbound, water has been closed throughout the project because that's where the
right,
construction trench was, but we've opened southbound outside of normal working hours.
well, and I think I saw signs for bike path on one of the detour signs, but is there any way to, just absolutely no trucks at all so that businesses like Gary's can still, or there's no outlet type of a
those
thing?
trucks are originating from that area. From
Yeah,
Red Core.
there's some.
Yeah, like they're
Yeah.
trying to get to RevCore.
Mm.
It's hard to give
Oh,
alternate
yeah,
routes
yeah,
for
yeah.
all the different groups that are hitting that.
Okay.
But reaching
RevCore
out to,
comes back as another one of our signs, but,
Yeah, that particular location has been discussed.
yeah.
Was discussed at the outset of the project. So we've trying hard to accommodate everyone involved and keep the trucks off the road.
All right. So my other comment, Gary actually kind of brought that up in his public comment, was again, as a whole village group, admin, public works, police, to really work on our communication further ahead of time, better, more redundancies, more than one way. Not everybody gets our Depot Life newsletter. Not everybody's on Facebook. And using sandwich boards, even in front with notifications at different things. This came up because of the water, and then also because of the treatment program for the spongy moth. And you kind of have to differentiate between what the outrage is about what's happening versus what the communication is. But if we can eliminate one of those, we're not going to make everybody happy, but if we can know that we're addressing it and that it's in more than one vehicle, I think that would be a good thing, a good project for us to take on. That I think we could be successful with. That is a little bit easier than this whole water line. Flag Day, I did see Dolores. She was appreciative of the work that the group, the administration did, and I think Catherine and all of the other members and groups that came out for Flag Day. Of course, she was disappointed in the number of people that attended, and so I don't know if we've thought about this before, if it's something that, I would have attended, but I work, and I can't. So if it's something that, in the future we might want to tie into one of our evening events where more people, we can have, another band, the Dundee Crown in addition to Kimber Lyrics or something like that. It's a nice vintage kind of an idea. Thirsty Thursdays was crazy. In a good way, but also that presents challenges with parking. And I had a business right on Barrington here that had huge problems with people just parking and handicapped people parking in the straight parts of the handicap spots and getting tickets. So I don't know, Chief, if you've got, I know you've got extra people out there, and then how difficult it is to enforce the handicap parking or the private business parking. It was a problem. I don't know if you heard from anybody on that, but it was ugly. I saw it myself. But the event was amazing. Pete was so excited. Catherine was excited, and it was a really beautiful night and a good turnout. Don't want to take that away from it. And then Wolfstock on Sunday, incredible turnout, really lovely, and quite in contrast to another competing animal thing in Carpenter's Park that had 4 or 5 different stands. This was just really welcoming. It was a really great environment, and I also think it's a really great example of how that depot park can be used by private enterprises in renting it, and so we have a really good proof of concept for other people that come forward with that. So I think that's all I have.
Okay. I have a list as well. First off, the depot RFPs. You sent those to us, Franco. When do we get to talk about that? And I mean, my worry is that the longer we wait, the less time this person has to start planning for the next year.
We're planning to convene events and depot committee either this week or next. So that committee will discuss it first, and then it will come to the village board.
Okay, so maybe for the July 17th meeting.
Possibly, yes.
All right. Just so everybody knows, I'm on the Quadcom board, and as part of that, I spoke to the chief of the East Dundee Fire Department about Fireman's Park in East Dundee. Little known fact, they don't own it.
What?
It's owned by the Firefighters Association or something different. But that group is made up of ex-firefighters from East Dundee. And they are, currently, that group is willing to talk about us taking that park from them. Which I personally, and I don't want to speak for the board, but I think would be a great idea. Because right now, it's pretty run down, and it's, they're not looking to renovate it at all. And so it's something I would like right now they're trying to find the agreement by which they were given the park. And they want to see if there's like a rider on it that says they have to hold on to it for X number of years before they can get rid of it. But they're open to the idea, and so I'd like to have us all think about whether or not that's something we want to do.
Hey Scott, can you remind me where that is?
Yeah, it's right across the street from here.
Oh, okay.
Right over on,
I call that the baseball field, so
yeah,
that's
except it's not a baseball field.
The
It's
really
not
nice
anything.
sand
It's
baseball
like
field.
it's just a big yard
it's,
with a concrete slab.
there's a backstop, so it counts as a baseball field.
That's true.
It's more kickball now.
And then I was thinking about our parking garage. Now, we put out an RFP for a parking garage that would sit on the gravel lot right off of River Street. But, maybe I should have thought of this a month ago, but have we ever thought about a garage or a structure or even just a lot that would start at the Dick West building on Route 72 and extend back to the street behind the Dick West building on that lot that was just torn down? You'd have access to it on 72, and you'd have access on the first street there. I don't remember what that street is called. What's that? Jackson. And then you could use that lot, gravel lot, on River Street for storefronts, which are immensely more valuable to us. People don't work at parking garages, people don't shop at parking garages, and people don't, live in parking garages. So we could reserve that land, valuable land, for our downtown buildings if we were to utilize that kind of behind downtown lots. We don't own either lot. I understand that.
And as far as I know, he has other plans.
Well, he might.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
might.
we have been in touch with the property owner regarding that parcel, and he has communicated that he does have a plan for that parcel. It's an interesting plan, and we can have a conversation about it.
Okay. Just a thought. And then I was wondering, what is the status? We're talking about trucks, about lions.
Haven't heard from them, but we keep in touch, and they continue to kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
So at some point,
Do we have that triangle lot that we can
So
even give them at this point, or?
that is going to P&Z for the subdivision next week. And once the subdivision is approved by the board, then that parcel will be able to be transferred to us. So then we will have ownership, and then we can move forward with Lion Eyes. But they have a difficult time coming up with a decision.
Yeah. That they've been thinking about for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, Andrew here mentioned an idea to me the other day that fascinated me. And it's another thing that I think we should all think about. But imagine, if you would, Water Street. If we were to close Water Street from Barrington to the other side of the park. Second. And extend that park all the way to the river. That would prevent people from driving straight through, obviously. You'd have to kind of make this diagonal route to get through to that terrible intersection at Water and 72 that nobody likes. The downside, I think, is that you're going to continue seeing all these trucks going through down Barrington rather than going, because none of these trucks are going to make that sharp turn to come back to 72. But that's just something that Andy talked about, and
Put it on Andy.
Yeah, just throw it on Andy's shoulders.
I really think it's a fascinating idea
It
because
is a fascinating idea. It's been kicked around for a little while.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't my idea, but
I'm having trouble visualizing it, but.
Yeah.
So it makes a ton of sense, and it's come up as part of the River Corridor study, and it will likely be a recommendation as an outcome of that study. But it's also, a traffic mitigation possibility. We still don't have our results back from the truck traffic study that was conducted in January, but we're hoping to get those soon. But that is a critical piece to like the overall puzzle of we need to implement designated truck routes. We need to figure out where these trucks are coming and going from and try to relocate some of these trucking facilities out of the downtown. And then, thinking about what kind of infrastructure could be put in place to, connect the downtown to the riverfront. That's a huge opportunity, is to make that park a little bit longer and, cut that extension into the downtown. So huge opportunity exists there.
Yeah.
And the problem of the truck traffic in downtown is multifaceted and is going to require several different solutions. But we have options, which is good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because
So-
I like the idea of that because it should reduce the trucks without causing undue burden on cars.
Right.
Because a car can make the turns around the park,
It's a pretty
but
seamless
without,
thing.
without creating Water Street as like a one-way or having a bunch of of those little insets to try to slow down traffic or anything
Right.
like that, cars could get around it, trucks couldn't.
Right.
Interesting.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
No report.
I'm gonna say no report.
we do, an arts council update is that we do have the artist starting on the mural on the building
Great.
at Spirit Hardwood on July 5th, so right after 4th of July. She anticipates it might be a week, maybe longer, but yeah, it's going to be exciting to see that go up.
Great.
We have had 4 different chalk art installations for these events. It seems like we've only heard good feedback of people enjoying, like whenever we're working on a project, we invite anybody walking by to come and grab chalk and join in, and it does seem like half of them say no, but then they turn around and come back with their kids insisting that they do want to, and they join in. So it's been a nice kind of low intimidation art project to pull in the community into art.
Are you guys doing a theme each week, or, because like one week it seemed like it was all Beatles?
It's up to whichever artist wants to be in charge of it.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it's all volunteer artists.
Uh-huh.
Like I did one, Trisha did one, Mary Kay Harvey, another person who just reached out who wanted to do it. So we're letting anybody in the community who's interested, and then they have an arts council liaison who's kind of working with them to make sure they know what to do or what they should or shouldn't do.
No naughty things.
Yeah, so basically just making sure there's nothing too risque happening or anything. But yeah, there's no rules. We're kind of making it, since it is very temporary art, the only rule is just that it should be something that everyone enjoys, that it's not controversial or not polarizing, but just inviting to everybody. So each person just gets to decide what they want to do. So we get more creativity and less telling them what kind of art they should be doing.
The funny thing is, though, they thought it was a Beatles cover band that night, and it wasn't. But it looked cool. So
Yeah.
that was an accident.
Yeah, that was. There's a lot of times we'll tell them what the event is and who's singing, and so sometimes that sparks into what they decide to do. And then Oh, I saw a monarch butterfly today at our house, so that was cool.
Yay!
Not that they're all back, but it was good to see a monarch flying by.
It's been a rough year.
Yeah.
I have a friend in Sleepy Hollow who raises them, and it's a rough year. So it's good to see one.
Yes. And then, yeah, Thirsty Thursday you mentioned was a hit. The parking was all the way to First Street, so it seemed like the biggest sprawl of parking from any of our events. So I feel like all of the events this year have been, they seem like they're much busier than the last year. Like they're kind of snowballing into getting more and more people interested. So, and Woofstock was amazing to see how much was there on a non-village event. That was a very big turnout. But that's all.
All right. And we want to continue going around the room? Bill?
Just a quick note that, I don't know if you saw my email today about the sponging off. The Department of Ag is providing us with 25 traps that we will hang throughout the community to, as a follow-up to the year-end treatments. One thing we don't want to do is create a situation where we're inviting moths to come into the community where we're treated. And essentially,
Didn't you say, Phil, that when we were talking about that one thing that the moths really don't like is a dry spring? Or was it a wet spring?
A wet spring.
Wet spring.
Well, that's too bad.
You sure did.
so you'll see the traps go up here this week or next week. So our hope is we can catch any flying moths, but we'll see.
Can you resend that email? I don't think I have it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm going to send you a video I got from one of the neighbors yesterday with signs of caterpillars at Hawthorne and Wilmette in Seaville. So your concern, it's 2 blocks east, north of Bonnie Dundee.
Yes.
And so I will send that to you, so that concern about drawing them in is well founded. But if Carpentersville thinks that they don't have a problem, they're sorely mistaken. So I don't know how we can sick the neighbors on Carpentersville now, but on their education program. But that is one thing. Also, I told you that we lost 2 oaks in our yard. One was a surprise. It was infested last year. The other one was damaged because of got hit by lightning. So it was already in a weakened state. So then there were other one neighbor, the Veltries, lost one, and they've had it taken down already. And they maintain their trees really well. On the other side of Maurice, the Rayco's lot that is a rental right now, they have a huge dead one there. So so there has been damage that has been done over the 3 years that they've been noticing it there. And there's more, but we'll keep watching out. We'll keep the communication going.
I haven't seen any active caterpillar yet.
Good. In East Dundee. Yeah.
I've seen nothing yet. That
Take
doesn't-
it. I'll take that news.
Yeah.
Yeah, and forward me if you do see Seaville
Mhm.
evidence. There's some contacts in Carpentersville that have been open to
Okay.
that kind of
I will send it
information
to
and
you.
having that.
I'll send it to everybody.
Yeah.
I just got it downloaded off my phone, email ready instead of text ready. Brandis.
No report?
Chief?
No report.
Well, thank you. Stay tuned for the PZHC's agenda and packet for next week's public hearing for the proposed planned use development for Pal Land. That's going to be a big public hearing and rezoning request by them.
No report.
No report?
Wow. All right. So with that, I guess we will go in, we'll need a motion for executive session under which items?
C11, C1, and C5.
Okay. I will move that we close to the public and media under the provisions of the Illinois Open Meetings Act, 5 ILCS 120/2, C11 pending litigation, C1 personnel and legal counsel, and C5 acquisition of property. And we will close from executive session and not return to public session.
Second.
Trustee Mahoney?
Yes.
Trustee Kunzi?
Yes.
Trustee Britton?
Yes.
Trustee Saviano?
Yes.
Trustee Triber?
Yes.
Trustee Sauter?
Yes.
Can we adjourn for 5 minutes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Take us back.
I like my multicolored crazy notes for the meeting.
Love it, love it. Good, multicolored.